Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hammer Territory podcast. This is episode 173. I'm your host, Brad Rowland, and I'm joined on this late night edition on a Wednesday into a Thursday by my co-host. His name is Scott Coleman. Boy, Scott, we tried to act like the Braves might struggle on this opening road trip, and I think I could speak for you on this one. We did not envision the calamity that has transpired over the last 7 or 8 days.
Hello, Brad. In my wildest, most pessimistic dream, I couldn't come up with this bad of a start for the Braves. 0-7. I think tonight's game was somehow the most painful, blowing a 5-0 lead to the Dodgers and then a Shohei Ohtani home run that's going to get shown about 4 million times on every highlight reel imaginable now for the next 24 hours to blow a 5-0 lead to go down 0-7 on the year. It was just like the ultimate kick in the nuts. I don't know. I am dead inside, Brad. And I've watched a lot of baseball. We have done a lot of podcasts over the years after tough games. And I am so deflated. I don't know what else to say. It is so deflating.
I was thinking about this before we started recording. I'm pretty sure, I'll speak for me and you can agree or not. I think we've done a lot of podcasts, like you said, hundreds and hundreds of podcasts, especially me and you together for near a decade at this point, right? I can confidently say on my end, this is probably the one that I've looked forward to the least that was not a playoff podcast. Like playoff losses are a little bit different, where it's like,
Sure.
This is excruciating. And we have to go through all the details, and it's going to be an hour long, and it's going to be one of those things. And, some of the meltdowns, the famous losses, right? We won't recount now. But as far as regular season podcasts, maybe you could argue like when there's a major injury, like when Ronnie tears his ACL, it's like, yeah, this is not going to be any fun to talk about, right? But this is a all-timer. And look, we've done a couple of podcasts already during this losing streak, so it's not like we have to do it all today. Thank goodness for that, right? But the fact that this series went the way it did, and you're right, I think I would argue, and I think I said it this way on social media tonight, it was like you could not draw up a more painful way to lose this game. After the first 6 losses, to go up 5-0, kind of in fortunate fashion. It's like, hey, they're getting some breaks tonight. Things are going well for the Braves for the first time all year in any fashion. And then the slow creep. It would have been easier if they had just given up 6 runs in the third. You know what I mean? But it was like, all right, you go up 5-0 after 2 innings, and it's like this. All right, now it's 5-2. Now it's 5-3. You bring in your closer, as we'll talk about more details later on, in the 8th inning, and suddenly it's 5-5, and then the best player in the world beats you in the 9th. And it's like, okay, here we are, man. And look, we should say at the top of the show, we are part of Foul Territory. Please join us. All the things that we always say on the show, but Hammer Territory, please subscribe to the podcast. This is not going to be a typical episode, I don't think, for us. At some point, I will probably give in to myself, Scott, and try to provide a little bit of a step back with some context. But that's not what anybody wants to hear tonight, which I certainly understand. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll lead with the big stuff, and then we'll kind of get into the details and the more new stuff later on. The Braves are 0-7, and here's the stat of the night. Maybe no team has ever started 0-7 and made the playoffs in the history of Major League Baseball. The only small ray of light there is that it's never been easier to make the playoffs than it is now. Expanded playoffs, the bar is lower than it's ever been. But that's still the stat. There have been 3 teams that were 0-6 that had made the playoffs. None of them, there's no teams that have ever been 0-7, and the Braves are 0-7. So I don't even know where to go from here, Scott. What is your reaction to that? Do you have one? Or are you just are we gonna jump on the pile of people that's just saying the season's over after 7 games? Where are we?
Man, I mean, I think my brain is pulling me in 2 different directions.
Yeah.
On one hand, I am so unbelievably frustrated. Just seeing the train wreck coming on Wednesday night. You mentioned it perfectly. It wasn't even like the Dodgers had an explosion. It was just death by 1,000 paper cuts. And even when the Braves would get out of a jam, and there was that moment where it seemed like it was all going to crumble, and then Ángel de los Santos got a kind of a fluky double play, and it was like, okay, 3 errors from the Dodgers. You get a comebacker double play to basically end the rally. Maybe this is the Braves' night. Maybe this is what gets this team finally going. They have run into some awful luck. They have not really caught a break prior to tonight with the errors that the Dodgers committed. And yet they still found a way to lose. And I don't know. I mean, where do you go from here? I mean, I think the coach speak and the player speak is one game at a time. We have Thursday off. We'll get back home for 6 games, try to beat up on the Marlins, who are at least playing decent baseball early, but a couple games you should win at home. But I don't know, man. I mean, it is like watching this team through a week. It's crazy that we are only a week into the season.
It's April 2nd. It's April 2nd right now. This is insane.
It feels like a lifetime, and it's a week. And every night when you watch this team, it's like watching a toddler walk over to a hot stove and put his hand on it and burn his hand, and then he screams. And you go, "Don't do that, little Brad. That's bad. That hurts." And then the next night, little Brad walks back over to the hot stove and he puts his hand back on the same mother effing plate and he burns his hand again. And then you do it again and again and again. And I don't know. I mean, where do you go from here? I mean, the team can't hit. They have been horrendous in big situations. They finally showed a little glimpse of it tonight, and then they spent the last 5 innings not being able to drive in anyone. It is just infuriating. I cannot believe I am this worked up about a baseball team after 7 games, but here we are. And I would bang my head against the table if it wouldn't just totally blow out our audio.
Yeah. I mean, again, I just said jokingly, but it's April 2nd. And if you're new to the podcast, which we might have new listeners, first of all, welcome. Thank you for being here. This is not usually the tone of this show, at least, especially when it's me and Scott. We're fairly, I would say, fairly even keeled, especially me, but even Scott. And I might poke fun. I'm sure I will poke fun at Braves fans for overreacting at times this season, including right now. Some of the takes have been kind of funny, I will say. But 0-7 is 0-7. And we did briefly talk about this before they went out west, right? We said all the things. Like, this is a really, really hard road trip. Like, the hardest one of the season on paper.
Yeah.
The Dodgers are and I said this before, I'll say it again. I think this Dodgers team is the best roster I've ever seen. And I'm not exaggerating, in the history of baseball. I would say that right now on paper. But if they'd gone 2-5, I would have been like, you know what, kids, this is not a shocking outcome to me. 2-5 against this schedule is pretty normal. Is it great? No. Will we be excited? Absolutely not. But it's 2-5. To go 0-7 the way they did, and we'll get into all more details later on about how all the runner scoring position stuff, another injury to Reynaldo Lopez we'll discuss at some point, all the things that have happened. It's not even just 0-7. It's the way it happened, too. It's the maddening nature. And like you said, when they did actually score some runs today. I want to get into the game today more. But before we pivot to that, everyone's clamoring for more on the game today, I know. The Braves, just some numbers broadly about the 0-7 start. It's the 4th worst start of franchise history. It's been a long franchise history for the Braves. Their worst start since 2016. When you and I were doing podcasts, that was a bad baseball team. And also, we just figured this out before we started recording, you and I together. I believe, unless I'm missing something, the Braves have not lost 7 games in a row at any point since the rebuild, which was the last rebuild season was 2017. So they've not lost 7 games in a row at any point since then. Now, they did lose 6 in a row twice last season and managed to make the playoffs against all odds. But 7 in a row has been a magic number in a bad way. It had not gotten there in the last 7-8 seasons. So, I mean, is the season over? I will certainly tell you that it's not, despite where my mentions would say. But you don't want to dig a hole any further. And we'll probably end with that at the end of the show. It's like, all right, what do they have to do now? Let's put our practical caps back on. But in the meantime, I'm okay to dwell on this a little bit. It's like this actually is as bad as it possibly could have been. Truly. The only thing that could have been worse in the first 8 days, as I'm gently knocking on wood without making noise on the podcast, is even more injuries. Other than that, like it's just it's a calamity. That's what it is, Scott. It's a calamity.
Yeah.
We have to acknowledge that at the top of the podcast. Everyone's hate listening right now. If you're listening at all, it's brutal, and hopefully it's not going to be like this forever.
Non-playoffs. This is, I think, this is the worst stretch we have seen from the Atlanta Braves since 2018. I don't even know.
Definitely.
I mean, yes, they have a couple guys injured, but nothing. It's not like last year where you had half the team hurt. I mean,
yeah, I mean today's lineup, as we'll get into later on, was kind of hilariously bad on paper for April 2nd. But to your point, like this was supposed to be the lineup. There was only one guy out of the lineup today, and he was not even hurt, Michael Harris. And he ended up playing in the game. So yeah, you get the PED suspension as we talk. I mean, even as I'm saying that out loud, Scott, the Lopez injury, the PED suspension, and 0-7 is like out of a comic book. It's the dumbest thing I've ever said. I mean, even as I say it out loud, it's the dumbest thing I've ever said. You know what I mean? It's been 8 days. That's happened.
At least the Braves didn't just give 3 years and $42 million to a guy coming off a weird-ass breakout season at age 31 who then got popped for steroids a couple months. I mean, that would be crazy, right? Wouldn't that be a real kick in the nuts to have your prized offseason, one and only offseason?
But the only major offseason acquisition, not even just prized.
Who had a breakout a decade into his career, and then he gets hit for PEDs. Surely that's not a coincidence. I mean, I know the Braves exercised a lot of goodwill, like a lot of it, to win the World Series in 2021. But yeah. I mean, what do we have to do? Do we need to sage the clubhouse and the plane, and do we need to have the Braves go to a holistic retreat on the off day to like get the demons out? I mean, I don't know, man. It is truly bizarre. I mean, it feels like a bad dream almost, doesn't it?
It really does. And, you know, there's that old Bill Simmons, was it like a 5-year grace period after a title? We're definitely breaking that right now with that. But hey, you get what you get. People are frustrated, and so are we. All right, Scott, that's certainly a doom and gloom opening segment of this podcast, but I think worthy of it. Not what we wanted to do, but here we are. We will get into more details on the game today, a little bit on the previous couple games, and then at the end of the show, talk about Marcell Ozuna, talk about the latest update on Reynaldo Lopez, the news, Jesse Chavez being DFA'd, lots of stuff to get to, plus a little bit of a preview of the weekend. It's a big show coming up, but first, work from our partners on the podcast.
Take me out to my TV on FanDuel Sports Network. Yeah. Watch me some dingers and RBIs. I'm just glad they have my local team live for its root. We'll root for the Bravos if they don't win. It's a shame. Braves games, announcers, and more Braves games. FanDuel Sports Network has the Braves. Stream now.
All right, Scott, let's dig in quickly, I hope, to the details of this game on Wednesday, because we have to leave with that. It's the most recent game. Now that it's Thursday morning where I'm recording. We talked around it, but the Braves did lead this game 5-0. After 2 innings, the Dodgers, as you said earlier, committed 3 errors. The Braves had 8 hits and 5 walks in the game. They had a massive number. They had 15 at-bats with runners in scoring position in one game. And yeah, they did score 5 runs. You can win with 5 runs a lot of the time. It wasn't enough at this game. Yeah. Before we come back to Bryce Elder, which is a topic, we have to talk about the 6th inning, which was, I think, the moment that we all kind of knew this was going to go wrong. At least deep down, at least we suspected it might go wrong in a big way in the 6th. If you weren't watching this game live, it's 5-3 Braves in the top of the 6th. The Braves load the bases with no one out, and their 3 best available hitters coming to the plate. I'm not exaggerating. They're literally their top 3 hitters coming to the plate. Bases loaded, no outs, 2-run lead. Ozuna, Riley, and Olsen on tap. Ozuna flies out. It was like a 270-foot fly out from what it measured. But unfortunately, Chadwick Tromp is running at third base.
If literally anyone else on the team is standing at third base there, the Braves get a run.
I believe that's true. Maybe not. I'm trying to think of who else is like really slow. Maybe not Arcia. Arcia or Olsen are pretty slow, but anybody that can run at all would have scored, and Trump cannot run at all. So that's one bit of mild irony / hilarity, right? But still, hey, one out, bases loaded. You got Riley and Olsen coming up. Riley, who's been brutal this season, he's not alone, but he has been brutal. I don't want to overstate that, but really has been awful so far. Strikes out. And in the moment, I did make a comment that I wish I could have clarified, because you know how Twitter is, Scott. The old For You tab They don't really follow along with everything else that you're saying on Twitter. They only see that one thing.
Yeah.
And people were like accusing me of saying that it was like some good at bat by Riley. And no, I just mentioned that it was a borderline pitch that I thought was ball 4 in real time. I thought it might have been ball 4, but swing the bat, Austin. It's a 3-2 count, and the pitch is right on the corner, and you're a slugger, like a silver slugger winning hitter. Swing the bat. He strikes out looking. And then with 2 outs, now you're, coming into that spot, bases loaded, no outs. You expect to get at least one, right? That's like the baseline expectation to get at least one run. Once you make the first 2 runs, your chances of scoring are basically 1/3 at that point, if that. Because Olsen's a good hitter, but now it's like you have to get a hit to score, and he doesn't get a hit. So he's the one guy I wouldn't blame in this situation. But yeah, I mean, that sequence, they're winning at the time. I mean, that's the funniest thing. Like, maybe we're being doom and gloom here, but they're winning the game. But it's like everyone's like, man, we'll come back to that at the end of the night. I think I literally said that on Twitter if they lost the game. And here we are coming back to it at the end of the night.
Guaranteed. And even though, I mean, Marcel Ozuna has done an amazing job getting on base. He's drawn a ton of walks, but he's not really hitting a ton. I mean, the on-base percentage is great, but he isn't really hitting for power. Austin Riley had a home run on opening day, and he has been abysmal since then. I know Austin's always been a pretty streaky hitter, and his highs are really high, but I mean, Austin has been horrible. He looks lost up there. It was a very borderline call. I don't know if the K-Zone outline box for every broadcast is the same or not. I was watching on MLB Network, and it did catch the bottom of the zone. It was a bad home plate strike zone all night long, but it wasn't like an egregious 6 feet off the plate call where it was like, whoa, no. That complete. And then, Olsen, I mean, the ball almost hit him in the hands that he popped up. And Matt's really done a good job of hitting this year. He doesn't have a ton of results to show for it yet, but his expected numbers are much better. But even that was just a bad at bat. I mean, you're not going to hit a ball that almost hits you in the hand with any kind of force. And I think every single person knew the moment the Braves blew a bases loaded, nobody outs with your 2, 3, 4 hitters coming up and they don't score. It was over. I mean, I texted you mid-game.
You did say this, but it wasn't over. We understand it wasn't over, but man, it did not feel like they were going to win. At that point. And there are texts to prove it. I think Scott was correct about this when we were planning the show, and tough scene there. So that was really their only major threat after the first 2 innings. So they did a good job largely scoring the 5 that they did. They were gifted some help, as we mentioned before. Dodgers were imploding early on. I follow a lot of Dodgers people, and they were like, man, finally the Dodgers are going to have a bad game. This is like one they're going to lose finally because they're playing like crap. And they were, honestly, at the beginning of the game. But the Braves did 5-0. You got to win, and they didn't win. Other thing to get to, I guess, before we talk about the bullpen management at the end of the game, Bryce Elder was the starter in place of the injured Reynaldo Lopez. I've been hard on Bryce. I will raise my hand about that. And I will say part of the reason why is that he came in with a 6.07 ERA in his previous 24 Major League starts. So he's been a bad pitcher for a while in the Major League level. He did his job largely in this game. I don't think he was good, but 4 innings, 3 runs. I think I might have taken that, honestly. If you asked me before the game, I would have been like, all right, I guess the Dodgers on the road. That's not a bad outcome. I don't think he was terrible either. It just wasn't like – it was a very Bryce Elder start. I think if you said, hey, Bryce, you're throwing 6 innings today no matter what, he would probably allowed 5 or 6 runs. And, that's not – they could have won the game. He left the game, they were winning. So it's not like he's not the reason they lost the game. And, he's supposed to be their 7th starter, 8th starter, and he ends up kind of pitching Dodger Stadium because of the way that this broke down. So I have a hard time. I saw people really piling on him. I didn't feel that way. I thought he was just acceptable.
Yeah, I thought Bryce made really one true mistake pitch to Tommy Edman.
It was a bad pitch, yeah.
Even the ball that Michael Conforto hit out, I couldn't believe that ball went out. It just cleared the center field wall. Maybe I thought it would be a double or something, but yeah, I mean, look, man, not emergency start, but as of 2 days ago, Bryce Elder didn't know he was going to make the start tonight. You said 4 innings, 3 runs. I think we would have taken that going in and just kind of prayed that the offense would do something against Blake Snell. Just a side note, how weird is it that this team's best offense has come against Blake Snell, Michael King, and Dylan Cease.
I don't get it.
But they see a bullpen, and it's like they've never swung a baseball bat before, or they see a fifth starter, and they can't score. It is such a weird, I mean, it's been bad, don't get me wrong, but also just a weird-ass season so far, and I don't know, Brad. I mean, I think there's a part of me deep down that says this team is going to figure it out eventually, but they need to figure it out soon, or they're going to find themselves 8 games back of the Phillies with 3 weeks into the season.
Yeah, they had 4 hits in the first 2 innings and then 4 the rest of the game combined. And I believe 2 of them were in the 6th, which ended up which is that failed rally that they had. So other than that, they did basically nothing the last 7 innings of the game.
Yeah.
So process-wise, it wasn't the best. Last thing on this game, I'll probably move on beyond just this one. I will give Snit some credit. It didn't work. I like that he was aggressive with the bullpen overall. Now, we'll probably nitpick it a little bit in a second, but he managed it like it was a playoff game, kind of. Yeah. With the day off tomorrow, that was the right approach. I said this like the 3rd inning. I was like, guys, the leash has got to be short on Bryce Elder. And it's not Bryce's fault, but it was like, hey, you don't play tomorrow. Your bullpen's not super overtaxed because they have been losing these games and all that. Like, throw the kitchen sink, basically. And the only guy that I think that I would describe as a good reliever on the Braves roster that did not pitch in this game was Aaron Bummer. Everybody else pitched. So overall, I'd say well done. The only issue, I'll tee you up actually. What did you make of Iglesias coming in when he did? Not that he pitched more than an inning, but when he came in.
Yeah, just to quickly set the stage, because I know everybody is happily reliving this one.
Sorry, guys. We'll move on soon.
Daysbell leads off the 8th inning with an out, but then gave up a single to the second batter he faced, and then Daysbell fell behind 2-0 with a couple of sliders that almost hit the batter. Mm-hmm. And Chadwick Trump went out to the mound, and then mid-at-bat, 2-0 count, Snit goes out and pulls Daysbell for Raisel Iglesias. And I know Raisel's been doing it a long time. I'm sure he said, I just need to execute better. But that's a tough situation to put a reliever in.
In his first, I know he pitched the other day in total garbage time, but in his first real outing of the season, to come in 2-0 it's a big challenge. And again, he's great. He wasn't great in this game, but he is great in general. I get having confidence in him, but that was to your point a tough one.
Yeah, I just didn't understand it. Daysbell, the Braves are clearly relying on him. 2-0 is not great, but I mean, you make one good pitch and you're out of it. And again, man, I understood. I actually think you made a great point a moment ago. I think Snit does deserve some credit for managing this game like it was a must win. And you could tell the Braves really, really wanted to win this game tonight. Going to leaving Daysbell out there, he could have pulled him after the single and brought Raisel in with a clean count. He could have left Daysbell in for another pitch or two and see what happens. Raisel ultimately walked that batter, probably because he was behind 2-0 to begin. It's all revisionist now. But even in that moment, I was like, all right, this is kind of weird. I don't know. But I guess if you're willing to try literally anything to get a win, even though it backfired tonight.
Yeah, and we won't tackle all this today because we just won't have time. But there's been a lot, and understandably so, a lot of outrage about Alex and Snit the last week because they're 0-7. I mean, everyone's under the microscope right now. I don't think Snit's done a bad job this season. I hated Hector Neris on opening day and said as much on his podcast. I was really mad about that. I still am now. Hated it. But other than that, I don't think there's anything that Snit could have really done any differently. It's not certainly behind the scenes, if you want to say that. And look, a lot of the time, Scott, if the team is winning, no one cares. If the team is losing, it's the manager's fault, whatever. I'm not a defense Snit guy at all costs. I've criticized Snit for years and years and years. I don't think he's a perfect manager, but I don't really know what he's supposed to do super differently in the first 7 games. Make guys hit better? I mean, okay, cool. By the way, they did hire a new hitting coach. Everybody was mad about Kevin Seitzer. They hired a new hitting coach. It hasn't gone very well so far.
I would, I was going to say, if Tim Hires does a 30-day review like most people do at their new jobs, I don't think it would go super well, but I tend to agree. Opening day was a train wreck for Snit, but
yeah, I absolutely hate it. I mean, we did too much on that on the show. I felt bad afterwards how much we talked about the bullpen management on literally opening day, but I really hated that. And also it was proven to be ironic maybe that they literally DFA'd Hector Neris like 2 days later after he was pitching in the 7th inning with a 1-run lead.
And hey, Snit went. I mean, I couldn't believe the lineup when it came out today with
aggressive. Yeah.
Eli White and Chadwick Tromp. I mean, they stacked their righties, which is kind of funny because they're all like fringe major leaguers, but they stacked the right-handed players on the roster against Blake Snell, which is probably the right thing to do.
It worked.
It worked. Yes, it did. I mean, they one more hit, Brad, like especially in the early going. There was in the 2nd inning, Brian De La Cruz came up with 2 runners on. He hit a 108-mile-an-hour line out right at Mookie Betts at shortstop. Yep. If that ball is a couple feet to the right, the Braves scored 2 more runs.
Didn't Olsen have one too?
Yeah.
Matt Olsen have a rocket today?
Had a 107-mile-an-hour ground out with 2 runners on base. It would have scored a run. It's just a little bit of luck. And, you can tell yourself, I think the most frustrating part of this is you can tell yourself a real story where if the ball bounces a different way a couple of times, the Braves could have at least won 1 or 2 games on this road trip. And it's crazy to say because a week ago we were all fired up and jacked up for the season, but even a 2-5 road trip in hindsight, I mean, we'd be drinking on the show. We'd be having a party, right? I mean, 2 wins would be incredible, especially against 2 really good teams. I don't know if the Padres have lost yet, by the way. They look really good.
They are good. Yeah.
But it's just a culmination of bad baseball, some bad luck, and just some really bad sequencing too.
I checked just now. The Padres are 7-0. So the 2 teams the Braves have played against are combined 15-0 this season. If that's a small consolation, if it's not, I understand. But if it is, there you have it. Scott, before we move on to other things, you teased this earlier, and we're going to make this on today's podcast our FanDuel Sports Network Spotlight segment. This segment is brought to you by FanDuel Sports Network, where you can stream all Braves games, at least most of the Braves games, and we'll tell you more about that shortly. But you talked about it earlier with Marcell Ozuna, and the lineup was interesting today, right? It was stacked with right-handers. It also, if you want to be a little bit more negative or at least pessimistic, you could note that it also included a bunch of guys who were like very fringe major leaguers, and that's weird to see on April 2nd. Yeah. But Ozuna has been, if you're picking a standout so far, the offensive standout by the numbers anyway. And the big thing is he's walking an absurd amount, like an amount that no one has ever walked, basically. It's like beyond Bonzian level. It's 7 games, so it's not going to continue. But part of that is that they're not supporting him behind him. There isn't a lot to be afraid of behind him, so teams are pitching around him. But just to get the numbers quickly on Marcell as a spotlight segment on the podcast. 13 walks in 7 games for Marcell Ozuna. He has a current walk rate, Scott, of 45%. 45%. His on-base percentage is currently .552. That's pretty good. Now, last year he had his highest walk rate in 4 seasons. So, like, he's walking more anyway. And he's been great. He was the only guy. How many times last year did we say this? He was the only guy last year. The only guy who had a good season. And so far this year, he's the only guy that has had a decent season. What have you seen from him? Is it just as simple as teams pitching around him, honestly? Or is there something he's doing differently?
I mean, Marcell has a great eye at the plate. And really, he has for most of his career. He's done a good job. But especially in this first week, he has done a terrific job getting on base. And hey, if I'm in a big situation and I have a base open, am I wanting to face Marcell Ozuna? Or am I wanting to face Michael Harris, who's been not very good? Do I want to face Ozzie Albies, who has not been very good? I mean, that's kind of the decision. And I think speaking on the actions of the opposing pitchers, they are pitching around Marcell to face Ozzie or Harris for at least most of the lineups. It's interesting, though, tonight, Ozuna was second. I think that's the lineup I would roll with moving forward. I would go, at least until Acuna comes back, I would go Michael Harris leading off against righties, Ozzie Albies leading off against lefties. Even if those 2 players are not your prototypical leadoff hitters,
They don't have one of those.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have anyone.
Yeah.
Unless they want to go like Tampa Bay Rays and do like Marcell Ozuna lead off with Austin Riley second.
Which Snit is not going to do
No.
that. They'd have to drag Bryce Thicker by his belt to fill out that lineup card, I think.
Yeah.
So,
but I do like Marcell in his OBP second. If Austin Riley ever remembers how to hit a baseball again, you would think he'd have chances to drive in Marcell. We talked about Olsen a little bit. The numbers have been fine-ish. I mean, they're down from his lofty standard, but Olsen is really underperformed based on his batted ball data.
Yeah,
he should have better. Yeah, he should.
He's the only guy. Honestly, he's the only guy, and that includes Ozuna, who has like batted ball data that looks normal. Olsen's hitting, and also Baldwin, I would say, who's played less, but Baldwin's the other guy who's actually hit the ball well, like way too well to be where he is in his actual numbers. But yeah, I mean, back to Ozuna real quick, just to cap the segment. Like he isn't the problem. You're right. I have him high in the lineup. Normally he's been like penciled in that 3-4 spot, and I get it. He's been the main power source. At least he was last year compared to the rest of the lineup. But if he's going to get pitched like this and be willing, and I think there's something to be said for this, to be willing to just take this many walks. It's 7 games, but like sometimes hitters get antsy and they want to swing, and he's not chased a lot. He's just like, hey, put me on base. That's fine. So
this lineup could use more of that approach.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why we're doing the segment on Marcel right now is like we've complained, and I think rightly so, for a year plus now about them not taking enough walks and not being patient enough. And on opening day, our brightest spot on that podcast actually was that they were really patient. They were really patient on opening day, and then it went out the window for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And it kind of came back today, which was nice. They a lot better at bats, generally speaking, not the entire game, but it was better. But I think Marcel is the one person, maybe alongside Olsen or maybe Baldwin, but especially Marcel, who's like been patient this year. And obviously this is a degree what it's not going to sustain. No one walks this much, not even Bonds, but he's doing the right thing, I think, generally speaking. And, given his proclivity to hit the ball hard when he hits the ball, I think he'll have a good season from what I've seen.
Yeah, encouraging. I mean, really, I guess Marcel and I mean, it's crazy to say this, but like Nick Allen is maybe the second brightest spot offensively, and he's played 3 games so far at shortstop. I mean, that's kind of it. I mean, yeah, Drake Baldwin has nothing to show for it, but he's just missed a couple homers and really rocketed a couple balls at fielders. We talked about Olsen. Ozzy Albies has been okay, but nothing special. Michael Harris is the same old Michael Harris and just has not refined his offensive approach at all in 3 years now, which is really frustrating. Jared Kelenic sucks. I mean, let's just say what it is, Brad. Jared Kelenick's not a very good baseball player. He's like 1,400 plate appearances in. This guy's not going to suddenly.
It's not going well for Jared.
Yeah, he's not suddenly going to figure. Brian De La Cruz has been. I mean, again, we're talking small samples, but I mean, just nobody on this team other than Marcel Ozuna has numbers that you look at and go, "Oh man, those are pretty good." And it's fitting that this team is like dead last in basically every offensive category as a result.
Yep. Shouts to Marcel, and a word from our partners now at FanDuel Sports Network. You can now stream Braves games through FanDuel Sports Network, and if you use the promo code BASEBALL30, that's promo code BASEBALL30, you can start it off with a 30-day extended free trial at FanDuelSportsNetwork.com/packages. That is FanDuelSportsNetwork.com/packages. Promo code BASEBALL30. Offer expires 5/2/25, $19.99 a month after free trial. Cancel during free trial to avoid charges. Eligibility restrictions apply. Visit FanDuelSportsNetwork.com for details. All right, Scott, we'll dive back in now. One thing we should at least bring up that wasn't game-related, but it's been interesting to see and observe is that have you noticed that Nick Allen seems to be playing a lot? Our guy, Mark Bowman, who's been on the show before, just flat out said it today before the game. Like, hey, they might just be going with Nick Allen at shortstop. Now, he didn't say that they were, but Mark's not doing it on accident, I don't think. I would imagine he's heard that. It was something like rumbling about, hey, maybe it's a split, but it certainly has not been a Nick Allen is the backup shortstop so far. He started 3 games or 4 games, at least 3 games of the 7 so far. What do you make of that? Because look, we all know the deal here. He can't hit either. Nick Allen has very bad numbers for his career as a hitter, but if you assume Garcia can't hit, Allen is probably better. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, when we had Justin Toscano of the AJC on the pod about a month ago, he told us that the Braves really, really like Nick Allen.
Yeah.
If you would look at the back of his baseball card with Oakland, it was very ugly, hit nothing. But just because a guy hasn't necessarily been successful with one organization doesn't mean a team can't work with him and make maybe a mechanical adjustment to a swing or his stance or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much been close to a 50-50 split with Orlando Arcia. I think our feelings on Orlando have been well documented on this podcast for a year and a half now. Why not? Why not give Nick Allen a chance? He's really good defensively. That was his one calling card when the Braves traded for him. And so far, he's done a pretty decent job. He's got a handful of line drive singles. He doesn't look completely overwhelmed at the plate for a guy who has not had a lot of success. And at this point, Orlando Arcia is who he is. He's not suddenly going to learn how to hit at age 30. It was interesting that Bowman flat out came out and said, Nick Allen might be the shortstop or at least a rotating shortstop moving forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag it because he said it and then he started and he's been in there a lot. And the glove is good by all accounts. Like that's why he's around and he can run a little bit and all that stuff. It may not be a sea change, but something notable there. And the other small thing about the lineup today is like already sitting Michael Harris on April 2nd is interesting. It came against the lefty and a good lefty, so I get it. But usually a guy that with that kind of pedigree and talent level is not taking a break in Game 7 when you're 0-6. And he played in the game, but I thought that was interesting. I didn't have a huge issue with it because it was, again, against a good lefty, and Harris has not been great against left-handed pitching. But what did you think of that? Did that even raise your eyebrow at all? Or was that just like kind of business as usual?
Yeah, I mean, I understood going all righties against Blake Snell. That's kind of the only way you have a chance against him, at least the guy who pitched so well last year with the Giants. Yeah, I was a little surprised. I mean, I'm glad they got Michael Harris back in there. Probably like in the 5th inning, I think he pinched.
Yeah, and he singled as well. Like he was involved in the game, and I think that was probably. It seemed like that was the plan. It was like basically as soon as Snell's out of the game, we're gonna go to Michael.
Yeah,
which made sense. I mean, he's one of the best players, but I just thought it was interesting. Also, we won't spend any more time on this than we already have, but they had this crazy run this weekend / week where they just couldn't score. They had 2 runs in 40 innings. That's not an exaggeration. 2 runs in 40 innings. Only one of them was earned, and it came on a home run by Michael Harris, which is normal, right? Until I tell you that it came off of Tanner Scott, an elite left-handed reliever.
Yep. Like,
of all the people in Major League Baseball, from Harris to homer off of, Scott's like probably in like the 10 least likely. Yeah, because he's an elite left-hander, and Scott. So it was like so crazy to me that the only time they had scored an earned run in like 5 days or 4 days, whatever it was, 3 days, was against a great left-handed reliever and a home run by Michael Harris. Just weird.
It's a funny game sometimes. That
funny is the wrong word for it right now, Scott. I got to say, I use that word too. I use funny a lot for the same way you are right now, but I think that's probably not going to go over well. I forgot the stat earlier. It's so good I have to get it in. So good / bad I have to get it in. This came from Codify Baseball on social media. First 6 games, the Braves had a combined batting average of 137. That's obviously terrible, right? We all understand that's terrible. Here's how terrible it is. Again, this is from Codify Baseball. They have it as that being the worst batting average for the Braves over any 6-game sample since 1942. What are we talking about here? 1942.
Who was your favorite player on the 1942 Braves?
I don't know. Weren't they in Boston still in 42? Yeah, they were. I think they were still in Boston in 42. They definitely weren't in Atlanta. It was either Milwaukee or Boston. I think we were in Boston. But like, come on, man. They were also one of 34 with runner in scoring position in that sample size. 1 for 34, Scott? That's like a batting average of 30.
They literally could have run up to the plate 34 times and tried like a running bunt and done better than 1 for 34. Like a perfectly laid bunt, you would think 34 times would happen more than once, Brad, out of 30.
Would it? I guess it would.
I don't know, man. Like, how
Uh,
is this real? Are we dreaming this first week? Because it was so. I'm out of words. I don't know, which is
yeah,
not
we're
good
out of
when
words.
you.
It's fine. It's a
Yeah.
podcast. We're out of words. All right, let's put a pin in all of the on-field action for now. If you want more, we'll have more in the future. I promise you. There's more to come on this podcast, though, including an update on Reynaldo Lopez, which was not the best, plus a little bit of a look ahead to the Marlins series in just one moment. All right, Scott. Ronaldo Lopez, one of the other calamitous things that's happened in the last few days, along with Jerson Profar. And if anybody missed it, we did an emergency podcast on Profar's PD suspension. It did not feature either Scott or I, but it was Stephen Tolbert and Sean Coleman. I was actually behind the scenes producing and had the not pleasure of telling them about Ronaldo's injury live on the podcast in the chat, and they were reacting to that in tough fashion. But anyway, now we know more about Ronaldo's shoulder, but not a lot more. On Tuesday, it was reported, and I guess Stitt told the media guys, that Ronaldo's going to have some sort of arthroscopic procedure next week to determine if he has structural damage in the shoulder. He's already on the IL, which we knew, but you never know how much of this is like sore stuff. But every one of the beat guys was pretty pessimistic, talking about like months, not weeks, kind of thing. I think Bowman actually used the word a couple months or more. I can't remember who it was. My apologies. It's late at night. It was either Justin or DOB. Somebody was like, there is optimism that he'll pitch again this season, was the way that they framed it. And I was like, oh, that's not something you want to hear. That should just be implied. You shouldn't have to say that out loud. So we don't know anything else about that. We probably won't know for a few days at least. Hopefully they don't get in there and it's like a Joe Jimenez situation where they're like, oh, this is a disaster. He's out for the season. Yeah. But you noted this, and I want to tee you up for it. Not only are they losing him right now, which is a big loss, like that leads you to throwing Bryce Elder in a game in Dodger Stadium, with due respect to Bryce. They also, if people forgot this, they redid Ronaldo's contract in November and added some length to it and some more guaranteed money to it at the end, which, look, it might be fine. But when you have a shoulder injury, shoulders are tough. They're probably more difficult than elbows at this point in time. You don't want to see that right after you've just paid a guy an extra year, basically.
Yeah, it's not great. Also, somebody noted that Reynaldo is going to see the like world-renowned surgeon Neil Elatrosh, who I believe has done Ronald's knee surgeries. He did like Kobe Bryant's Achilles back in the day.
He's like the Dr. James Andrews now. Yeah. Like I think James Andrews is like not like retired, but like kind of retired. And I think Elatrosh is like the next like big name surgeon, I think.
Yeah. So, he's who all the best athletes in the world go to for the most part.
I'd go to him too if I was Ronaldo, to be fair to everybody involved. I'd be like, hey, I want that guy.
I'm probably not going to look in the phone book for a surgeon if if I'm concerned about my shoulder. And the fact that the Braves guaranteed the 4th year on Ronaldo's deal. I mean, let's hope. If he has to have a serious shoulder surgery, I mean, obviously he'd be done for this year. Maybe it'll just be a cleanup procedure or a scope and he can come back maybe in the summer at some point. But shoulders are just terrifying. I would rather it be Ronaldo's elbow, quite honestly. I'd rather him saying, oh, my elbow's let me get Tommy John and I'll be back in 14 months. Shoulders are terrifying. Ask Kyle Wright, who had shoulder surgery 18 months ago and is just, now getting back on the mound. I mean, shoulders are really scary. So it's just, you just have to cross your fingers and hold your breath that it's not the worst for Ronaldo. And what does his 2025 hold? I have no idea. I mean, I think there's a world where he's back by maybe June or even the All-Star break. But for a pitcher the Braves are really counting on this year, the fact that he made one start and is already down is not good.
No, it's not. And look, they don't have – okay. They do have depth, but they don't have depth that they want to use. Is the way that I put that. Like I've said this before, even with as low as I am on Bryce Elder, for example. Bryce Elder would be in the rotation for a lot of teams. That didn't mean he'd be good for a lot of teams, but he'd be the 5th starter on a lot of teams. They clearly don't want to pitch Bryce Elder, if that makes sense. So you have that. You already have Smith Shawver in the rotation. who we like, but is unproven at this level. I like Grant Holmes. Grant Holmes is fine, but like, that's 3 names. You're going to get Strider back at some point soon, hopefully very soon. He's going to throw, is it Friday, I believe, in Gwinnett? Yeah. And if that goes well, that's one step closer to him being back. I'd feel a lot better, Scott. I don't know about you. If I looked up in 10 days, 15 days, and I saw S. Strider on the probables list, I feel pretty good about that. But they need him. And that's the thing. Like, without Lopez, they already needed Strider back anyway. We all acknowledge that, but it becomes even more so. If, let's say, Ronaldo misses 3 months, I have no idea if that's a good timeline or not. I have no clue. They will need, in capital letters, Strider. They just will.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to put some pressure on a player on this roster, Spencer Strider, it just went up exponentially.
And you don't want to do that too, because it's like you want to take your time. Like he's signed long term. It's like he's just 2 elbow issues, 2 elbow surgeries. Like you don't want to rush Strider, and I hope they don't. So don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying you rush him back. Then you want to be very, very sure that he's ready, very sure. But we have to hope he's ready. Yeah. It's like he's going to have to be in there because right now they have 2 guys we trust. 2.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, we're trying to, I guess, maybe find a silver lining here or some reason to be positive after this opening week from hell.
We're trying.
But you get Chris Sale, you get Spencer Strider, and you get Spencer Schwellenbach. If those 3, and this is an if, but if those 3 are healthy and even close to the pitchers that we know they can be, this team is going to have a lot of chances to win baseball games this summer. Then Grant Holmes is your 4th. I think Holmes will be okay, as we saw pitching.
I'm fine with Holmes.
Yeah, at Dodger Stadium is literally the toughest game you're going to pitch all year. I think Grant's going to be okay. And then Smith-Shawver's stuff. I mean, even nationally, people were talking about AJ's debut against the Padres. Everyone was like, holy F, this split changeup is unbelievable. Yeah. But can he throw strikes? I mean, if you can have the nastiest stuff in the world, but if you need 85 pitches to get through 4 innings, that's obviously not going to work. But again, not to put everything on Spencer Strider, but it kind of feels like in some ways the season kind of hangs on Strider's elbow, and that's a little scary.
It is, and of course they need Ronald Acuna back as well, which is a different podcast altogether. But that will be helpful when he arrives, whenever he does, probably in the month of May at this point. Other quick news things: they did DFA Jesse Chavez after he threw mop-up duty on Monday. I think no one will be surprised if Jesse is back at some point. But they did kind of, I won't say they had to. They chose to get a fresh arm in there. So they brought up Zach Thompson, who no one's ever heard of, and I understand that. 30-year-old anonymous long reliever, just to have an arm available. And they also later on in the week traded for someone named Michael Peterson, a right-hander, another org guy, 30-year-old. It was for cash, by the way, with the Angels, because the Braves, they only have 1 phone number, and Alex only has 1 phone number. It's actually just the Angels. It's like, hey, Angels, who you got?
Yeah, and then the other bit of news that went down on Wednesday was Hector Neris, former first right-handed arm to come out of the bullpen this season, Hector Neris.
7th inning, 1-run lead, opening day, Hector Neris. Yeah. Come on, Snit. I defended you earlier. Come on. What are we doing here?
That one hurts because the Braves really let one get away on opening day. But Hector Neris, who was DFA'd on Monday morning, elected free agency tonight. Not a big surprise. He's going to try to catch on with the team.
He will. I bet he will, honestly. I bet he'll sign somewhere. Yeah. He's a respected name. It's the same thing it's the same thing with the Braves. The Braves brought him in, I think, kind of sight unseen and gave him a shot that he didn't really earn in spring, to be honest. So maybe it'll be probably a worse team than the Braves on paper that he signs with, but we will see. Other than that, like Sean Murphy had a good day on Tuesday in Gwinnett, hit a home run on like the second pitch he saw, which is nice to see. We'll leave it there for the news portion of the podcast. It's late into the night. Last thing here, Scott, because we probably won't, unless there's big news on Thursday, and I hope there is not, candidly, for our sake. This will be our last pod until the Braves play on Friday at home. The home opener is Friday. Presumably, people will still show up to the stadium, despite
I was going to say, you might be able to get a cheaper ticket for Friday's opener than you would have a couple weeks ago.
That could be true. I would hope it's the home opener. I would hope it's rocking in there on Friday. But vibes are low, so I get that. But hey, Spencer Schwellenbach on the mound on Friday. That's been announced by the Braves. Schwelly on Friday, Smith-Shawver on Saturday, Grant Holmes on Sunday, facing the Marlins. The Marlins are 4-3. They've been frisky early on this year. They are not supposed to be very good. It's 7 games. I'm not going to decide that they're good now because they're 4-3, but they, we'll see. And as I believe you cited on social media, our pal Sean, our co-host, the optimist of the bunch of the four of us, laid it out. We're like, hey, even if you start 0-7, if you come home and just beat something out of the Marlins, you'll start feeling okay again, probably. You got to do it though. You got to win. You got to win games. And I don't even want to say it out loud, Scott, but can you imagine if it was on Friday to the Marlins?
If the Braves lose the home opener on Friday with Spencer
Schwelly on the mound,
yeah. God help us all. That might be an 11-minute podcast, and 8 of it would be ads. The Braves have to take advantage. And I know we over the years we've done it's baseball. You can't project wins or expect wins. But if the Braves can't at the very least win 2 games against Miami, God help us all. I mean, I think if the Braves are flat against the Marlins, it then might be time to be like what's going on? Is it?
Look, we're not going to do this on this show. Unless you want to, we're not going to do this, in my opinion. But I'll just say this out loud. If the Braves lose the Marlins series, you are going to see people talking about Snit's job.
Yes. And
not in just a fan craze. Because look, every single day, I know this happens to you too. Every single time they lose a game, I get fire sent in my mentions. I'm not saying that. I'm saying a conversation, a real one, about Snicker. And I'm not having it now, to be very clear. But if they're 1-12 or 1-13, it's going to start. That's going to happen. It's going to have to happen. I think Steven said this, or maybe it was you. Somebody did. One of our guys did. Mentioned last time the Braves had this kind of start, they fired Freddie Gonzalez a few weeks later. Now, Freddie Gonzalez is not Brian Snitker. He's not a 45, 50-year organizational lifer with a World Series ring. It's different, to be very clear. But speaking of the point, I'm just envisioning what happens if they lose the Marlins series. And that is the nuclear option would be we're gonna have to pull the plug. And to be clear, that's not gonna happen, I don't think. I believe as of Thursday morning right now, the Braves are gonna win the Marlins series. The Braves are better than the Marlins. This is where I, at the 52-minute mark, pull out I'm gonna use my head instead of my heart card and say, I still think this is a good team. I might be wrong. I have less confidence than I had a week ago. This is a good team. But I believe it's a good team still. I do. And 0-7 is going to challenge that assumption. I get it. But I also believe if you gave me true serum today, and I'm giving it to you right now on the podcast, I think the Braves are going to still win a bunch of games and be fine. But I say that till this part of the podcast because I don't want people to yell at me because I think I might be wrong. I might be wrong, but I still feel pretty okay. Just less okay than I was a week ago.
You can tell yourself a story, and this is what I'm going to tell myself so I can get some sleep tonight, Brad. They could have and probably should have won opening day.
Yep.
They could have won game 2. They should have won game 3. Game 4 probably deserved to lose. They could have won game 5. They could have won game 6, and they should have.
No, game 5 they lost 6-1. I probably can't take that one.
I'm mixing up my days. It's very late.
No, okay. Game 4 and 5. So the last game of the Padres series and the first game of the Dodgers series, they got blown. They kind of got blown out. Those are the only 2 games that they were decisively beaten.
Yes, Sunday and Monday. So
Sunday and Monday.
Right. So they should have at least 2 wins. I'd probably argue 3 because of how Chris Sale pitched the other night.
At least 2, I would agree with you.
And they could have won all but 2 of them. If the ball bounced differently, they could be 5-2 or 4-3. And this is not me copium. I'm not going to do that.
We're doing this at the end of the podcast for a reason. This is not how we actually feel. It kind of is.
Maybe I'm delusional, but I think what I'm trying to say is they could have a better record than 0-7 suggests. And as long as they take care of the Marlins and then the Phillies come to town, if they could win, say they win I mean, if they win 5 out of their next 6, I think the vibe will be so much better. Even if they go 2-1 against Miami and 2-1 against Philadelphia, I think then they'd be 4-9. I mean, that's not good, but you're okay. There's
4-9 feels a lot different than 0-7, Scott. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
Even 3-10 would feel better. Would feel different than 0-7, which is funny because all it is 3-3. And I'm not saying that you'd be good with that, but that would feel better. It just would.
Yeah.
Like even just getting a win. It's funny. It's so funny to me. Lately on the podcast, the difference in perception between winning even today. If they won today and they were 1-6, no one would be happy, but everyone would feel better, like by a lot. And it's one game. It's one baseball game on April 2nd. So like if they finally win a game on Friday and maybe get 2 in a row, it's like, all right, people won't be dancing in the streets just yet. But it's like, all right, this feels like a baseball team again. But when you come out of the gate, to bring things full circle on this podcast, and you don't see a win for a week, which means we haven't seen the Braves win a game since September. You know what I mean? And it's funny to say that, like, it's obviously it's for effect, but we have not watched the Braves win a game that mattered since September.
Yep.
And that's how you get to here.
And the way last season went, I think makes it all the more frustrating.
Of course it does. Like I'm not blind to that either. It's like that's the thing that was frustrating to me actually today. And I think again, it's kind of the For You tab of it all. People that don't follow our work, that don't know us. But like, well, you're being silly because like this just discounts all less. Oh yeah, no one's discounting what happened last season. We talked about it endlessly about how frustrating it was.
Yeah,
like no one had a lot of fun last season. It was a accomplishment that they made the playoffs, given all things that went well. I'm sorry, basically all things that did not go well, I should say. But that was not a fun season. They had to grind it out the entire year. They didn't hit all year long. No one's ignoring that, but you're 100% right. That does build on this. If last year was the 104 win bopping season all year long, and yeah, they lost in the playoffs. I get that. But like it would feel better right now than it did coming off of last year when they didn't hit for 4 months. Yeah. And now they're not hitting again. Like now, then you get into the here we go again situation. And that's what's everybody's head. It's like, oh my gosh, what if Riley is just not good anymore? What if, you know what I'm saying? Down the list. Like I saw this today in my mention. You might have too. People are like, literally, there are fans who believe that like none of these guys are good anymore. And my brain says that's insane. But I also kind of understand it to some degree because we watched them not be very good last year. And now they're doing it again. So anyway,
yeah,
it's weird.
Just such a weird 2023, basically across the board, career best years for the entire lineup. 2024, when they were healthy, were either career worst years or the worst year they've had in quite some time.
Or hurt. Or all be above.
Right, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Right. But even when guys were healthy, Austin Riley was not having a great year before he went down for the season. Ozzy Albies in between his injuries. Michael Harris had a down year. Like that's building. It's like an avalanche. It's a snowball effect. And I don't know. I thought you made a point a moment ago. If the Braves can just win one game.
Just win a game, man.
And that's why tonight's loss was so unbelievably frustrating because then you can tell yourself a story of, okay, hardest road trip out of the way. They have a win. They have a happy flight home. They have a day off Thursday, and then they're home for 8 days, I think it is. You can tell yourself a story, and it's like a shooter in basketball. Sometimes you're having a bad shooting night, and then all you need to do is see one go in, get to the free throw line, see one ball go through the hoop one time, and then all of a sudden you kind of have your mojo back. We really were hoping that was going to be tonight when they were up 5-0 and had the Dodgers on the ropes. And, of course, they ended up losing in the most painful way imaginable. And I guess now we'll just kind of hope they take care of business against the Marlins because, I mean, God help us, man. If we'll do a show on Sunday night, as we always do, if the Braves lose the series this weekend to the Marlins, seriously, it might be 20 minutes of screaming and a couple of ad breaks. And thank you all for listening and have a good night.
Yeah,
I mean,
we kept it together mostly on this show. We did. Not on purpose. I was covering the Atlanta Hawks at the same time tonight to bring everybody behind the curtain. So I had to give Scott like a 10-minute break between the final out and the podcast, which I think was probably a good idea.
Yes,
it wasn't even on purpose. It was. I knew how mad Scott was, and I was like, oh, I'm not set, because honestly, what happened was the game ended so quickly. I was not, for whatever reason, I was not prepared for a walk-off home run. Oh, we have to start the podcast right now, and I wasn't ready. So maybe that worked out well for us, Scott. But anyway, I agree with you 100% though. If we're talking, if it's 3 or 4 days from now, and we're doing the show Sunday, and the Braves are 1-9, 0-10, it's going to be a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
Not that I don't always enjoy talking to you, but that will be a tough one.
Well, and you get the short end of the stick, because my wife will only listen to so much of me ranting and waving about the Braves and sports. So I'm like, Brad, we got to do this effing podcast.
We have to do this now. I will share the. I will not share the entire text we got from Steven. Steven's on vacation right now. And Steven texted us at the end of the game, and he led with God bless. Like, as basically a good luck to us. And then there were some other words after that we won't share. But we got through it, Scott. An hour later, we talked about baseball. Hopefully people that made it to the end enjoy the podcast. Please subscribe if you've not listened to the podcast or subscribed before on YouTube, on audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, etc. That definitely helps us quite a bit. And honestly, we always thank you, and we do mean it all the time, but our listenership has been growing, which we are very thankful for. Hopefully you stick around despite what's going on in the field right now. And we definitely appreciate all the support always. Scott, if there's anyone new who has not found you yet, where can they find your slow descent into mania on social media?
Yeah. If this was your first episode listening to the pod.
Oh boy. Welcome.
God bless you. We will do better podcasts, happier podcasts, hopefully.
And shorter podcasts, hopefully as well. Lots to talk about today.
A lot of stuff in our nightly therapy after watching the Braves, seemingly. Maybe we should do a podcast every night, Brad, because then we can get it out of our systems. I am at Scott Coleman 55 on socials. I will be there. Tweeting through it is probably the best way to describe it. And we'll have another show, a couple of shows, I think, this weekend. And then, as always, a big thank you to everybody who has been checking out the show. We really do appreciate you.
Absolutely. So, yeah, one more time, subscribe, rate, review, follow the show on social media at Hammer Territory. Follow Scott, follow me if you want to. And we will have a show at the very latest Sunday, probably between now and then. Might do one. If they win, we'll try to do a more positive episode at some point, perhaps. But the best way to find the show, always just subscribe. It'll be delivered straight to you when you do that. So appreciate everybody being here. Enjoy the rest of your, I guess it's Thursday now, Thursday into Friday, and we'll see you all next time.